Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is the chilling case of Frances Knight. This case actually happened in the 1960s, and let me just say, nothing could have prepared Thomas Leslie Harvey for what he would find when he decided to surprise his mother and decorate her house while she was ill in hospital. This was a suggested case by Natasha, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have, and I really found this one really interesting, so yeah, thanks for that. Just like to let you know, I mean no disrespect to anyone I talk about, I've just gathered this information from the internet and compiled it into a video for educational purposes. Sarah Jane Harvey was a sweet little 65-year-old grandmother who lived at 35 West Kimmel Street in the seaside town of Rhyl in Wales. She had actually spent over 40 years within the same house. After her husband Alfred died in 1938, she began earning her living by taking in lodgers. Her pretty much uneventful life continued up until April of 1960, when she was admitted to the Royal Alexandra Hospital for observation. This was due to this mysterious illness that nobody really knew what it was at the time. It was later determined to be a stomach tumour. But generally she was really tired and she was really unwell, yet her doctor was having a hard time finding the cause of her illness. On the 5th of May in 1960, her 29-year-old son, Thomas Leslie Harvey, who was a taxi driver, decided that while she was at the hospital, him and his wife would give her this really nice surprise for when she got home. They were going to clean and redecorate her house. Thomas lived in a neighbouring town in Penzance near Abergele with his wife and son. One of the first things that Thomas wanted to tackle was this large cupboard that stood at 6'11" high at the top of her stairs, It had actually been left there since World War II, but it had always been kept locked. When taking on this cupboard, instead of surprising his mother like he thought he was gonna, he got the surprise of his life instead. He went on to state that for as long as he could remember, his mother had told him to literally never open that, to never ever go inside that box. She said that it contained the belongings of a woman called Frances Knight, who was an elderly lady and one of her previous tenants. Sarah had never ever let anyone open it and basically forbade it, pretty much, with good reason. So for as long as Thomas could remember, the cupboard had been there and it had been locked, and she had never opened it. He decided that it was finally time to move the cupboard. He was going to try and clean it up a little bit, and moving it would enable him to get to the walls behind it and surrounding it so that he could obviously redecorate those too. He just thought that it was full of old clothes, maybe a few old possessions, some useless things that she had left behind. Once he managed to force his way inside it with a knife, he did not just find clothes in there. Oh no. Inside, the closet walls were very grimy. They were full of cobwebs and dust, and he found this flypaper all over with dead insects stuck to it. And amongst the stacks of clothes and other things, he found a mummified body of a long dead woman that was literally covered in decades of cobwebs and dust. Generations of flies had long ago festered on the face, basically leaving no facial features left whatsoever, whilst moths destroyed most of the hair and clothing, although she was found wearing this very tattered, moth-eaten blue nightie. How shocked he must have been. Sarah was 65 years old at this point, and he was decorating her house as a surprise, and he finds a mummified body in the closet that he was forbade to ever look at. You would never ever assume something like that would happen. It's something that you couldn't even make up. The corpse had been there that long that it had naturally mummified rather than decomposing, and that was because of these warm drafts of like dry air that was seeping through the cupboard were then circulating around in a small space, and it mummified the body. Pathologists later tested the body and said that it was rock hard and remained as a statue. A large proportion of the body was brick hard and resisted a hammer and chisel. Thomas, horrified by the discovery, of course, contacted the police. They came round, they took the body from the cupboard. With great difficulty, I might add, it was taken to the mortuary where it would be examined by pathologists. The media got a wind of this story and they began speculating on ritualistic practices, and the so-called mummy in the cupboard case really captured the imaginations of so many people. People found it really, really strange that it happened in such a sleepy Welsh little town, when around the time, if you would have asked anyone in the community who their most average, unexciting, unremarkable resident was, would have probably answered Miss Sarah Jane Harvey, and would most certainly be incorrect. It was just so bizarre, it just completely shocked the community. So police immediately go to Sarah's hospital room and they question her extensively about the discovery. It's a very unusual bit of home decor. When told about the body, all she could say was, "Oh goodness gracious." She denied any knowledge of any body whatsoever. When it was suggested that the body may have been that of Frances Alice Knight, she dismissed the possibility, saying that she had left her home soon after the end of World War II to go and live in Llandudno. Sarah apparently just hoped that everyone would just shrug the entire thing off, assuming that some complete stranger had just crawled on into a cupboard and died. When she realised the police were certainly not going to drop the matter, she reluctantly gave a far different story. In early 1940, she went on to say that Frances Knight rented one of her rooms in her house. She said that Frances was actually separated from her husband, who worked as a dentist, but he would still send her part of his wage, which was the equivalent of £2 per week, as maintenance. Frances was in her 60s, she was partially crippled and often suffered from severe muscle pain. So basically she gave Sarah the authority to go and collect this money from the post office every week. About a month after her arrival, Sarah said that she had heard Frances scream. She ran into her room, she goes up to find what's going on and see if she's okay, and she finds Frances on the floor, having apparently fallen out of bed or something like that, and she went on to say, "I'm in an awful lot of pain and I would rather be dead." So Sarah, being a lovely woman, goes downstairs, she goes to make them both a cup of tea and she brings it back up to the room, and when she does, she finds that Frances is dead. Naturally frightened and shocked by this sudden death, she said that she panicked and she didn't know what to do, so she could think of nothing better than to simply shove the corpse in the cupboard and put all of that unpleasantness behind her. She added, "I realised that I've been foolish, but I kept trying to keep things covered up." Sarah also kept Frances's maintenance checks. She put the cash in her own bank account, and when she made her weekly trip to the post office, the clerks would often ask her, "How is the old lady?" "She's keeping very well," Sarah would reply, with a little bit of unintentional dark humour. She did this for 20 years, basically until the body was discovered. I believe the amount of money that she had was over £2,000 from those weekly checks over the course of 20 years. In the years that followed, she just told people that Frances had gone to live in a nursing home, and nobody had any reason to doubt her. We don't know if Frances had any family, if she was ever reported missing or anything like that, so there may have been nobody looking for her, and then nobody would have had a clue. The thing was, the explanation that Sarah gave to the police, first one they didn't believe straight away, and then the second one they also didn't really believe, because the pathologists found that Frances actually had died with a stocking tied very tightly around her neck, along with a groove, like a ligature mark, to suggest that she had actually been strangled. Due to the mummified condition though, they couldn't actually determine the cause of death. Sarah Harvey quickly found herself accused of murder. At her trial, the arguments for both sides were fairly simple. The prosecution stated that Sarah had strangled Frances in order to keep the maintenance check for herself, and it was money related. The defence countered by pointing out there was no proof that Frances had actually died of strangulation. Now, it was a well-known occurrence that people in those days would often tie a stocking around the neck as a folk medicine cure for a cold. So they argued that maybe Frances had a cold, maybe she'd tied the stocking around her neck to try and cure her cold as a bit of unconventional alternative medicine, and then died of perfectly natural causes. No one seemed to really find this very convincing, but no one could also prove that it was impossible either. What ultimately derailed the prosecution's case was that Frances Knight's corpse was in such bad condition that they were unable to get the cause of death. And so how could they then prove beyond reasonable doubt that Sarah had actually murdered her? If they couldn't prove that she'd been strangled, then there's no saying that Sarah strangled her. Sarah Harvey was actually found not guilty of murder, but found guilty of obtaining money by deception between May of 1940 and April of 1960. She had to serve 15 months in prison for fraudulently collecting the maintenance checks, but ultimately she was acquitted of murder. There wasn't enough evidence to convict Sarah of murder despite suspicions and circumstantial evidence, which does seem to implicate Sarah in Frances's murder. If it wasn't Sarah involved, then who was it? If Sarah Harvey was guilty of murder, she kept this information with her until the day she died, which was actually very soon after she was released from jail. The mysterious illness that indirectly triggered the discovery of her little secret did turn out to be incurable cancer. She went on to live in a nursing home after her release and died shortly after that. The mummy in the cupboard case is very much a case that is still discussed in Rhyl, even now. To this day, the only person that really knew for sure how Frances Knight died was Sarah Harvey. So what actually happened to her still remains a mystery. Was she murdered for financial gain, for Sarah's financial gain, or was Sarah actually telling the truth? As of February 2021, the case of Frances Knight remains unsolved. I just want to say this case totally fascinated me. I hadn't heard of it before and I found it really shocking and really interesting to look into. This sweet little grandma and mother who was well known in the community as being such a lovely lady was hiding such a secret in her closet at the top of the stairs for 20 years. It was just unbelievable. But yeah, that's the end of the case. If you guys have any more suggestions you'd like me to look into, let me know. I'll look into them for you. Give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for similar content if you so wish. Just like to give a quick mention to my Patreon, which is in the description if you guys want to support me on there. Thank you so much. I appreciate anything that you do for me, watching my content, commenting. It's all brilliant in making my channel grow. Anyway guys, that's all I have today on the case of Frances Knight. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.